You might even say there are two sides of the same coin. And how, in your opinion, do you think that these topics shaped overall energy community secretariat's work, and maybe what's ahead for us in these areas? If you can elaborate, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica, and thanks for the presentation. It was really insightful, and by giving broader perspective, it is much easier now to engage in that discussion. The Energy Committee is the institution, for those who might not be aware of, which is framing the cooperation between the European Union and the countries neighboring to the European Union, the 6 countries of the Western Balkans, plus Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, and Ukraine being actually, when it comes to the economic potential, a half of the Energy Committee. So this is the key partner. The equal treatment is provided to all of them. So, and, all of those countries won. Kosovo now on the pathway towards European integration, and this is, I believe, the main driver for aligning the climate policies in these countries to the policy of the European Union, including, of course, the discussion on the emission trading scheme for the energy community. The decision to launch the discussion has been taken December 2021, when the so-called decarbonization roadmap was adopted for the energy community, which set the objective of discussion on the carbon pricing, but without specific date and without specific decision on the form of the carbon pricing. So the need has been recognized, and the geopolitical shift caused by the Russian aggression on Ukraine, and the decision to open the negotiation and open for membership, not only for the countries of the Western Balkans, but also of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, really accelerated that discussion very recently. So how this discussion is accelerating? This is, I mean, very natural that the ministers of environment who are part of that process, they want to understand what carbon pricing system for the energy community countries should be aligned. And this discussion has been already for a couple of months or even longer, and this discussion is expected to be concluded by the ministers at the meeting in December, so a month from now in Vienna, where the impact assessment of the different forms of the carbon pricing will be presented to ministers for consideration. This is a quite comprehensive document which has been established throughout a very inclusive process with the involvement of the ministries from the contracting parties, which is analyzing different forms of carbon pricing, including an option of joining the EU ETS, but also the no-action scenario, which is also one of those which is being analyzed, but also different options of emission trading schemes, regional one, covering the CBAM sectors, or covering the sectors which are covered already by the emission trading scheme in the Europe. So some forms of the carbon tax, which are also being considered. As I said, the outcome of the study will be presented to the ministers, and we expect that the ministers in December will take note of that, and that the outcome of this discussion will be welcomed. This is, however, just a starting point for having a serious decision-making process on how to move forward. I mean, what form of carbon pricing should be adopted, and when, actually. And CBAM in that context plays crucial role, because CBAM frames the discussion and to some extent limits the options which are on the table. And this element of running the discussion under the circumstances are really, I mean, critical for the decision-making process. Why it's so important? Because as you know, as it has been also presented, CBAM covers 6 sectors, basically, including the sector of electricity. So far we have experienced extensive trade in electricity between the contracting parties of energy community and the European Union. For a long time, the countries of the Western Balkans, they have been net exporters to the European Union. However, the level of the exportation differs between the countries, like Bosnia and Herzegovina being quite substantial exporters. Other countries like Albania, they are not. Some of the countries like Serbia, for example, they are rather responsible for transiting electricity to the European Union. And this is quite the element. Ukraine, our situation in Ukraine or in Moldova are different. Georgia is not physically connected to the European Union, but Ukraine started exporting electricity in June 2022, so during the wartime, and Moldova is rather importing electricity from Romania, and is also relying on the electricity trade with Transnistria, which is the region not controlled by the government, Chisinau. So the situation is quite complex, and based on that, we have to run the discussion how to move forward with that discussion. What is the key objective? The key objective is to keep the country towards the accession which will come in the future, which is not defined yet because the process of negotiation is happening, but at the same time to avoid the disturbances caused by CBAM for the electricity markets. And this disturbances could be quite substantial. According to the calculations made by the Secretariat, the cost of increase of the import prices for electricity only from the Western Balkan countries to the European Union, including the cost of increase of the cost of the electricity which is in transit through the Western Balkan countries, will be 1.9 billion euro annually. So this is quite substantial number which is to be taken into account. Why it is important for that discussion? Because the electricity trade could be, according to Article 2.7 of CBAM regulation, exempted from CBAM. And this is exactly the exemption we want to look at the option how to make the trade in electricity, which is existing plan, not affected, or effect on that should be limited between the countries to be members of the European Union soon, but now they are running quite extensive trade in electricity with the European Union. For having this in place, actually we have to fulfill several conditions. Of them, they are critical. The first one is to have a market coupling in place in all of the contracting parties, including Moldova and Ukraine. There is an intense and excessive work being done to transpose the electricity integration package, implement the market coupling with the European Union. The market coupling, which is a form of integration of the electricity, which is characteristic for the European Union member states, so that the countries will be treated in the same way like the countries of the European Union. And the second condition for enjoying the exemption from CBAM for electricity basically is to take the commitment for establishing the system of carbon pricing applicable from 2030 with the price of carbon equivalent to the price in the Union. And basically, this is the decision we want to take. We want to take the commitment in the energy community, the commitment which might be taken in 2025, which I hope very much, establish the future system, which we define based on the study which is to be presented to ministers soon. And this is, I mean, now we are reaching this moment where we have to take the decision whether the contracting parties of the Energy Committee are going together to approach that process, or whether they go separately, because the individual option is always the case. But you should remember that in the CBAM regulation, there is an obligation, especially for the electricity market. If you are aligning alone with the European Union, and if you take the decision to go alone, then you have to the carbon border adjustment mechanism border with your neighboring countries. So, for example, if Ukraine would decide to go alone, then Ukraine is expected to establish the border with Moldova, which will be another detrimental border in place between two countries which are expected to European Union soon. So instead of having more integration, instead of having the process which is provided the level playing for the economic companies, rather we will be establishing new borders. And that is the reason why we as a secretariat, we are rather promoting the regional approach, the organized way of so that we can together get exemption from CBAM and avoid the disturbance in the existing trading in electricity. All of that, what I have said, you can in the CBAM readiness report, the paper which has been very recently issued by the Secretariat, which is step by step how the countries of the Energy Committee are the conditions from the CBAM regulation, and where how progress has been made on the pathway towards preparing to CBAM, and in specific relationship to the CBAM exemption for electricity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. State Secretary, you've heard the presentation, Director. What concrete steps is Moldova taking to manage the impacts of CBAM, especially for those sectors that are maybe more disproportionately affected by CBAM?
Hello, thank you for the questions. And I understand now the consequence speakers. Thank you, Mr. Director. You gave our homework and understood that we have no time, but nevertheless, we have started already to prepare for the upcoming Ministerial Council. We started from the last year when it was performed a study by the Youth Security Activity, carbon pricing, a carbon border adjusted mechanism, implications and impacts in Moldova. This study, actually, it was the first one. It was a boom for the Republic of Moldova, for the entrepreneurs, and for, it was kind of educating and alphabet intensive for the entrepreneurs, for the government, and for NGOs, for everyone to understand what is carbon pricing, what is carbon tax, how it will affect. Well, after that, slowly but surely, we started, with the study that was presented by the energy community. We have presented our comment, and we hope that the uncontrolled territory will become controlled, even indirectly. This is what we're doing now and trying to get on board, the left bank, this work, but nevertheless, we hope to do it. The study actually determined what are the sectors, the most affected sectors on CBAM, impact by the CBAM, and especially what is the potential economic impact until 2035. Of course, thank you for taking it into account. And of course, we heard at the Ministerial Councils, and this is for sure, Mr. Director, and we are taking into account as following the discussions held internally, we created, it was the decision, government decision, where it was approved the National Council Change Committee formed by the ministers under the Prime Minister, and all that will be taken, and this one is it will be submitted now to decide, on what exactly path we will take, which scenario to be taken into account. All the scenarios are impacted, but this is what you do, you have to determine what exactly is more advantage for you as a country, small country, every country, discussion with the partners, and so on and so forth. So following the discussion actually held in the country, the introducing of carbon tax is seriously taken into account, is considered in Moldova. And of course, taking this into account, we have to do internally by the Ministerial Council, but nevertheless, the impact that the CBAM liabilities and impacts on trade competitiveness with EU trade partners as the revenues on prices paid on carbon as opposite of to allowing external partners in the EU to accumulate them. The carbon tax is not something new. Adopted the law on climate action where it include the carbon tax. So actually advance, how to do it and to have an umbrella. Well, in order, when it will be decided the government to introduce a carbon tax, now we're discussing it and final study from the energy community in order to submit it to the council and to decide it. But nevertheless, if it will be this tax, which is strongly, going on this direction, we need to start shortly the public consultation, engage transaction, treasury and budget officials on new legislation. For that, we created an internal interministerial technical working group where we discuss the potential with the technical staff from different ministries to understand the impact on economy, to understand the impact of energy, how it will be excluded and so on and so forth. So basically, all the necessary steps have been taken into that. We also consider the fact that the carbon tax should be substantially high, and we take into account the example of already somehow educated their their environment with the carbon tax, which is good. But since we did not have it, we will start, with a higher tax, because introducing a lower tax will not, get a good. And high, it's in terms of the Moldovan price. Not EU. Yeah. As an alternative, Moldovan installation should be considered negotiating alternative options to reduce the carbon intensity on traded products. This is what we do with the entrepreneurs, and especially the impacted sector. This is cement, and we discuss bilateral with the entrepreneurs how they might affect, how their founder external partners, they might help them. They're quite open and they're quite ready. This is what is interesting. Moreover, we discussed with the entrepreneurs on the left bank, and they also are very advanced in that, and they're well informed. Well, we will also consider which sources of sector to target, consider economic and energy profiles. Of course, we will consider, if we're introducing the tax, how it will be taken, where the revenues will go. Most importantly, Moldova will need to determine the political feasibility of the tax and what would be needed to sensitize target installations to accept and pay a rigorous public consultation process. We tell you from internally because we introduced some taxes, some tasks on the entrepreneurs. They're booming up, but this is what we have to do as a government: educate them.
Thank you, State Secretary. And Mr. Rabchin, so what would you say is the role of CBAM in Ukraine, role of CBAM in Ukraine's planned energy transition and actually driving the investment in carbon technologies?
You promised to be a brutal moderator, but you asked such a lovely question. So, yeah. And honestly, I really love this for the composition because it's about climate instrument, but on European integration. So I'm the advisor on EU and Green Deal and climate negotiator. So like perfect for these interrelated topics. And the compositions like we are, like with our colleagues from Moldova, been discussing something with our Polish colleagues and the European Union. So perfectly matched. Answering your question, like I personally like CBAM because like only the, how to say, only when it was announced and when like in 2009 with the Green Deal program and, like more operationalized in 2020-21, like Ukrainian businesses, instead of how to say, lobbying against or prolonging the, so not in time. So like they switched. So immediately they started to experiment on like, we will have CBAM, like you should start the emission trading system. So like it was a really great, it was like without any implication, it changed the rhetoric of the Ukrainian businesses. So this is why I like CBAM. We have two levels of discussion, right? There are companies, sectors, business, lobbyists, or the governmental officials who said, we negotiated, like there is a clause on CBAM that it might be for the force majeure. And there are people who are, reaching the government saying like, let's postpone the implication of CBAM on our businesses, on our economy, while we will develop a decent emission trading system. We'll join the EU and CBAM will not. And let's move kind of like more, like slow but qualitative approach. There are other more like rely to second group who said like the implication of CBAM in 2026, 27, 28 will be not as, after 2030. So we shouldn't waste our, like our available resources, let me put it that way, which is not big. And let's focus on implementation of the emission trading system. I guess like we definitely need to invest our time and efforts with Artur in exempting the electricity sector on CBAM, because it's clearly written. It's not like force majeure, the ticking the box, but like it's really hard exercise, but you need to do this. And you do the system, you start implementing it. What we lack and the war, whereas the war could be an excuse, it's only the data. Like we cannot have data, and this is like where definitely we have excuse of the war, but the war is not an excuse just to draft a law, just to start studies, will be responsible, just to hire people, educate people, speak with the business. So like you doing your job. And this is like what the second group, including myself, are advocating. Decision will be political in December, whether we will join separately or like together. There is like a lot of to be made, but we are in EU accession process already for almost a year with the screening procedure. And what I see that these resources from the government are now focused on a bilateral screening procedure in June and July for the for the cluster 4, which is environment, energy, transport, and Trans-European network. So I guess like in the process of preparing presentation, understanding where we are and discussing with the European Commission and of course like with the energy community, which to whom we are belong till the last day of our accession. I guess like first day, okay, you want to have an additional day without any problem. Yes, I guess in this half of a year we will define the trajectory of the implementation measures taken, because a lot of decisions has been either postponed or there's non-action. I would like to say, as you properly mentioned, like we were able to afford ourselves this non-action, but this is like a crucial time to make a decision. So I'm really happy to see there are a lot of studies, there are a lot of expertise, there are a lot of people who can advise us on like super important and complicated issues. And from what I see, like we will do our best in order to move toward the carbon pricing. When I was member of parliament, I voted with this finger for the increasement of a CO2 tax, which already been in place in Ukraine from 10 years. So at least it is there, and like we are understand what to do. Now, like I guess today our colleagues from energy efficiency, state energy efficiency agency, which are now governing some kind of like a decarbonization fund, which utilizes this CO2 money, which is a kind of like a proxy or like the test ball for using the emission trading system revenue. So there is another concept that like we should establish a national emission trading system to do the test. And the funds from the emission trading system should be circulated to the decarbonization or like modernization or like environment activity of the businesses, which might secure us somehow from a CBAM. So like we're like in a deep discussion with different partners, and we'll be happy to continue this discussion during our screening and post-screening exercises.
Thank you. Actually, if I may follow up on what you're saying.
Only with the brutal way, please, as you promised.
You're mentioning the two groups, but in the end, actually, Ukraine, in these very difficult circumstances, is making progress in setting up the national Ukrainian ETS. And you mentioned the problems with data collection. I'm thinking, what's the biggest challenge for you now in setting up an ETS? Is it the data? Is it the identification of installation? What are the things that you're struggling most right now?
Regarding the data, like as an economist, you will have some kind of a data. Then you adjust, approximate, do some coefficients. Like you will have the equation, the CBAM and emission trading equation. Then you will calibrate it for like, like with some good and bad scenarios and the emission trading system, even with the EU, without a war, with all of the intellectual resources available, like sometimes failed, sometimes like did through different phases. So I'm not afraid of kind of mismatch. I guess the biggest challenge is the human resources, intellectual resources available, because I've been to DEXT, it's German environmental agency, which is governed the emission trading system. And I spoke with the people, I understand the level of these people. I was a deputy director of the department. He has a PhD in economy, and like the way he operates, I understand that like we need to find this type of people like have the mission talk with a colleague and ask him like how many people does you have like on governing this. So I guess like maybe I'm just like seen from a like from a helicopter as a developmental economist to see how many resources it will take, how much people it will take to establish and properly govern it. But the government will do this, and then like you need to do this on behalf of a business. So they need to hire people. They need to educate them. They need to execute them. Then we need to have verifiers. Like to set up this infrastructure. This is like a challenge, because I would like often for the people who doesn't understand what CBAM is in Ukraine, I'm telling this is like a returning on of the VAT system. So you have a tax administration in every single region. You have central tax administration. You have accountants in your business, and this is like money that is circulating, and this is like a CO2 calculated somehow. So this is about some virtual. So the monetization of this CO2 to make it more digital, to make trust to the system is highly important. And I guess I will be honest with you, like I will finish with the issue of corruption. Like that needs to be like there should be decent people who will not misuse the system because of manipulation. Like you can ruin sector of the economy. So it should be decent people, well educated, who will link the system. And but this is like a really challenging and interesting exercise. So I'm optimistic. I don't see why we should fail, like having such a big level of support, such a big level of awareness that this is important. Yeah.
Thank you. And Robert, maybe we'll zoom out with you, because basically you're looking at the impacts of CBAM on the European and global level. And what would you say is the role of CBAM in shaping the climate policies on these two levels based on your analysis?
Okay, thank you, and very inspiring the discussion. Just give me some reflection, which I will maybe briefly also share, because we are jumping in a future now with your question, and I feel that because we are 3 hours in front of Warsaw and Vienna time, so we can think that we in a upfront of what is happening now in climate policy. But just before I would just jump in time when we access EU, it was more than 20 years ago, and almost 20 years of ETS running in Europe, and we access this without any accession in accession treaty and let's say easy tasks, but it was the just beginning of ETS, so it wasn't so hard as it is now and so complicated as it is now. And I will agree that the good staff working on that is a must. I mean, the MRV, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification, is the basic, and people that has to done that and has to be prepared to do that and be educated in this respect is a crucial point for success. So we working in the National Center for Emission Management, which I have a privilege to head on governing on ETS, CBAM, ETS2, and every aspect of the MRV and registry. So this is very complicated bunch of stuff which is inside of the climate policy and ETS, which is very maybe complicated at the beginning, but when you start from the scratch and from the very basics, then having in mind that we are your neighbors, so we are for sure we will help you assist in that, and not only us, energy communities is working on that as Arthur already said. But what is the CBAM? CBAM, we heard about all problems of the CBAM. You mentioned that the CBAM makes you happy because you find out that the industry in Ukraine is thinking how to avoid CBAM, so they're thinking about taxation and climate policy instruments. So I would say also from the European perspective, maybe, because the CBAM is not the thing that and taxation is not the thing that European wanted to impose on neighboring countries or our alliance or outside of the EU, but this is a necessity. So Europe was always in front line in the climate, let's say, ambition. And this ambition only goes up because we push the momentum. So we are at the stage that it's not possible to get back because we invest a lot of money within the EU in industry and new technology, which needs to develop further. And this climate policy is it's economical and industrial economy, like the overall policy of EU. So that means that it's not only taking care of climate, but also on the prosperity of Europe. So that means that if we follow up the climate ambition, then we need to not destruct other, let's say, part of the global emission, because when we push a lot with the climate reduction in Europe, then the cost of this reduction increases. So that means that the industry from Europe is moving out from Europe, and we observe that. And it's called phenomenon carbon leakage. So that means that not only investments are going outside of EU, but also the emission is going outside of EU. So that means that if we cap this emission within the EU, we don't cap this emission outside of the EU. So the result is that the emission globally is increasing because of the ambition of EU. So we have to also address this problem, and that's why CBAM was introduced. Of course, it raised a lot of different, let's say, effects, like you mentioned, that everything other, let's say, regions and countries are thinking about introducing on their territory the carbon tax or carbon pricing instrument. And this is nice because it gives us this future momentum, which we are analyzing at the moment, which is how we can align the systems that are built up outside of the EU, because the solution is that the CBAM is a temporary thing. So when we are crossing this border and everything's are on the same page, then this border tax is going somewhere, right? So we are the same bubble, which we are focusing on a reduction and building the prosperity based on new technologies and low emission technologies. And then there is no problem of CBAM because it's somewhere else. Right? So in perfect world, there won't be any CBAM. CBAM will be outside of the global, right? But in temporary part, the CBAM is something that gives the information to outsiders where they should think. And this is perfect example, as you said, that this also is based on not only on governments, but the industry. So if the industry see that there's a need to invest in new technologies and not following the past steps, then everything is going in the right direction. So that means that from the administration and country level perspective, the aligning with the carbon pricing instrument is it's an obvious way go forward. But but the issue is that as much as shown, the marginal abatement cost, so the cost of the reduction of 1 ton of CO2, are different in different places. So there are cheaper options, there are harder options, and in EU we are in a place where the cost of the reduction will increases because this low-hanging fruits we already used.
Actually, if I can jump in on that point, and if you could take out your crystal ball, or probably in your case, an Excel table, and forecast, then what's the solution? What's the future development of climate policies? Are we where do you see a growth of emission trading systems globally? Are they going to be linking? Are they going to be more emission trading systems set up? What's the model telling you about the future of climate policy? Just a humble question.
I think what you're saying is not model. It's more the how we see a global climate policy, and I think the basic point of entrance on this topic is Article 6 of Paris Agreement, which is discussed for many years and nowadays as well, because it's operational. I mean, the works are operationalized that, but the ETSs are growing enormously. In the previous years, I would say that because of CBAM as well being introduced, or say that we are introducing in Europe, there was enormous explosion of ETS and carbon taxes around the globe. So this is like, it's partially the phenomenon of talking about CBAM. It's not it even implemented. It was just talked. Then people around the globe and countries said, okay, we need to do something about it, because otherwise we lose the market in Europe. So that means that this is like the economical driven. And so things with ETSs is done. So the ETSs are growing, and this is the best solution for everyone, and more see that as a perfect match. But the next step is how to align these ETSs, because they got different marginal abatement costs. And this is things that we are now focused on analyzing that. And you can call it like the matching two systems with each other, like the one with the high prices like EU, with the low prices like, I don't know, China or even California ETS. Then the just simply matching that decrease the prices in EU, which is not thing that we need, but increase the prices in other jurisdiction, which is not also the way we should put forward, because it's the prices increase of the goods and fuel poverty and the cost of the goods that are produced there. So that means that we have to combine it in a more controlled way. And we introduced the idea of putting inside of EU the carbon bank. So the institutions that will simply trying to match all these systems together and matching the, use this, let's say, credits or however you call it, offsets within the EU in a way that that not destroy the ETS as such, and at the same time give more money to the other systems to invest in the transition. So this is like can be also treated as a aid from European side to other jurisdictions, which are we need more money to flow into their economy.
Mr. Rapchin, yes, jump in.
When I was a CBAM negotiator and we met with Gentiloni, with the vice prime minister, with some, like, it was two climate people and 2 trade lawyers in the room from Ukrainian side. And when, like, we were one of the first in the world which receive a kind of like huge information about CBAM. It was like some secret stuff, like everybody tried to gather information, what it's all about. And when we understand, like myself as a climate colleague was like, yes, like finally those climate people are like powerful enough to influence. And I saw the eyes of a trade lawyers like, wow, like it will be here, like we are in trouble. yes, it was interesting personal experience, but it resulted in like half of the world trying to sue European Union in WTO, saying this is like a restriction, and it like to one discussion to another discussion that yeah, let's do the climate change. It's a good instrument, but I don't know like whether you heard it or not. The first day of COP, like the agenda has been approved only like closer tonight because the issue of unilateral climate trade measures, like the developed country decided to put it to the highest possible level. That this is like not the way that rich countries should behave, and there was a postponed. Like we lost a lot of time of like not doing anything, but like from what I feel, like and it's my ninth COP, like in Brazil, like this issue might be raised much more aggressively and intensively. So like we might think of how can CBAM could be tweaked somehow, like if we would like to have it kind of like global, if we would like to say like the global carbon price, like we need to maybe rethink CBAM and like how can we ask like everybody to join to fight the carbon leakages, not to fight with the CBAM.
Thank you very much. We have, I think, 2 minutes left. If there's maybe one short question, we can still thank. Director, please.
No, I just wanted to comment on that what as we are in the Ukrainian, the very specific situation and the consideration in Ukraine, Alexei was referring to whether to use or activate this force majeure clause from the CBAM regulation for the specific war situation in Ukraine. And I have to confess something, maybe not relevant, but I think the logic is the same. I was also negotiating the Poland's accession into the European Union, but I was responsible at that time for animal welfare and food safety issues. Yeah. And there was a discussion actually on the in the European Union on increasing the size of the cages for chickens. It's irrelevant for that discussion, but it was very important phenomena because we applied for the exemption from that. And the economic result was that all the cages, they have been sold from Germany to Poland. And we made very fast win on that. But in the longer term, we lost because the Polish able to sell the products to the European Union market. And Ukraine now is waiting for the rebuilding process. So it is so important now to send the proper message to the future investors that we want the technologies which are compliant with the European Union policy. We don't want the technologies which are not compliant, so that we can avoid the stranded asset for which we will be paying then the enormous cost when you. So don't apply the force majeure.
Thank you for this unexpected conclusion, Mr. Rapchin. I'll be happy to give you a word, but I'm afraid we cannot because we have to finish now at no? Oh, sorry, please.
Just a small remark. Like we definitely would like our chicken and like to be sold on Polish, French market, and we will fight for this. Like indeed, it will be a really interesting, like agriculture and environment, and the cross section of environment and agriculture will be an interesting issue to discuss. But like you also would like to, like European Union producers of metallurgy would like to have Ukrainian iron ore, and like CBAM might restrict it, and like the value chain will be some for another. So like there are different implications of this. And from what I heard from the German CBAM authorities, that there was a specific, I don't know, like tooth making dentist equipment that been produced in Ukraine, because the dentist like wrote a lot of CBAM papers. He rejected the Ukrainian producer, just because of the bureaucracy. So this is what I'm thinking about, saying about maybe the CBAM of the first stage needs to be redesigned, maybe tweaked somehow, the same as an emission trading system. Maybe we should avoid all additional bureaucracy, you know, and having the spirit of CBAM. But like, if we will go into so much bureaucracy, and our companies will spend so much money on consultant who will teach us on to doing CBAM. So just not on implementing the real project on changes, but to comply with European bureaucracy. I guess with the changes in the US, with many other events that are going on all over the world, you know, like bureaucracy is good, but debureaucratization might be needed in order to succeed. This is like my personal view.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all our panelists. If you could give them one round of thank you for coming.